Okay, so hi everyone. This is our very last session, our official speaker session of the program. So thank you everyone for joining. We will have one last closing session next Thursday morning, California time, for those of you who want to, hear me and Nicole talk about like the program in general, but in terms of content and professional, relevant, transformative tech content, this is our last session. So I'm very pleased to have Tracy with us. Tracy is actually also one of our mentors for the entrepreneurship track, and she's one of our 5-star mentors, really doing a really awesome job. And I know we sent you guys all the bio of Tracy, but let me just remind you today's topic. It's about product and user experience design. This is Tracy's expertise. She's a seasoned product owner and experience designer, and she was a CPO at Interaxon, and prior to that, the GM and executive producer at Harmonix, which was one of the first and most successful music-based video game developers. So she has experience using hardware, software, as well as the creative goal of enabling joy. So Tracy, we're gonna have the same format as we do every time with our speaker sessions. I know you have some slides to share with us today, so please share your screen. I will remind you when we're at about half an hour in, and then open up the floor for questions, and I will moderate that. Okay?
Excellent.
Yeah, please go ahead and share your screen.
All right. Is that working? Great. Something here. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you guys for having me here. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to all of you today. Please let me know, Rue, if you guys can't hear me. All right, excellent. Well, I'm going to get started and give you a little intro to who I am. Thank you. All right. So for over 20 years, I have focused my work on creating experiences that change the way you feel. The highlight of my career really was the video game career for 14 years that I spent with Harmonix Music on a wild ride. I started as a producer, I became a senior production executive, and then the GM of the studio. And we created the Guitar Hero, Rock Band, and Dance Central video game franchises that brought joy to millions of people around the world. We had no idea that we would actually end up creating a cultural phenomenon back in 2005 that quickly reached beyond the world of video games, but really to non-gamers and generations from small children to grandparents who are playing our games. And we redefined the party genre in people's living rooms around the world. So there's a lot of learnings in those 14 years, and I hope to share some of those with you today. After my career in the video game industry, I had some personal and family health challenges, and I became very interested in the brain. And really improving people's lives who were struggling became the driving force of really the next chapter in my career. And so I took a huge leap, and I joined a new industry and moved from Boston to Canada and joined Interaxon, the makers of Muse, the brain sensing headband, and Muse meditation experience. And, you know, looking at a world population suffering from higher and higher levels of stress, anxiety, depression, I saw a real opportunity for us to help people find relief, balance, self-awareness, and maybe even some calm in this chaotic world that we actually live in. And I also thought, well, I can extend my learning about the brain and really help the product team take this very unique meditation experience to the next level. A couple years later, I returned to my home state of California, where I'm now bringing my experience in video games into the world of healthcare. You know, for many years, observing people playing our dance and music games and all the anecdotes from fans who would, you know, reach out to us, I really became a true believer that immersive experiences can really change the way our brains work. It can rewire us. And I really believe in the potential of personalizing those experiences to you. And so it's been really fun to be an advisor and a consultant at Achille, who is pioneering digital treatments as video game experiences, as well as working in the Neuroscape lab with Dr. Adam Ghazali, where we are currently working on a VR music game. So I thought it would be useful to return to Nicole Bradford's framework of the human well-being spectrum that she introduced to all of us at the beginning of the Academy. You know, so many games and products I've worked on have sought to change the way people feel across this emotional framework that she kind of put together for us. And so I want to start off by sharing a description of 4 of these games and products that have effectively reduced stress or managed anxiety, reduced loneliness, increased happiness, increased empathy, increased connection, and actually enabled joy. And then later in the talk, I will refer to them as we talk about best practices. So the first game I want to talk about is Guitar Hero. You know, when I joined Harmonix back in 2000, the co-founders had a very clear mission for the company: to enable the joy of making music for non-musicians. And they decided to use video games as the medium and set forth to make music games on video game consoles, initially for gamers. You know, we were in the entertainment industry. It took us developing and releasing at least 3 other music games before we really hit the state of joy with Guitar Hero. Guitar Hero delivered an experience unlike anything that you could get on a standard video game controller. It actually made you feel like a rock star. When you strapped on that plastic guitar and pressed the fret buttons in time with the notes cascading down on your television screen, Guitar Hero connected you, the non-musician, to this feeling of being on stage in an arena with Black Sabbath or ZZ Top or the Ramones, and feeling like you were the one that were playing those amazing licks and riffs, that you were that famous guitar player, and that the sounds that were coming out of your television set, you made. It was clear from the success of the Guitar Hero franchise how much joy and happiness elevated people who played. But it was not just gamers. You know, it was their family, it was their kids, it was their parents, it was their grandparents, it was their girlfriends. And we heard a lot of stories from our fans about how relationships were saved, marriages were even started, and families were playing together. The next game I want to talk about is Rock Band. So it was our goal to make you really feel like you were in a band. And it was the first music video game to combine all of the aspects of virtual music making. So, you know, singing, pounding drums, playing guitar, plucking bass, where 4 players could act together as a group and fulfill their fantasies of touring the world as a rock band. The initial offering came with peripherals for everyone to play in person. So in the box, you got a microphone, a plastic drum set, and a faux axe. Now the feeling of connection emerged through the experiences we created in a variety of ways. First, that connection to oneself with that physical aspect of playing your faux axe like you're a rock star, or drums. The emergence of meaning as you connected with these great rock songs that you love. And then finally, the connection with your other bandmates, usually in the same room where joyful emotions and empathy were experienced. So a little scientific side note, years after the Rock Band games were released, in 2015, research was done at McGill University on empathy, social stress, and pain. And they discovered that the shared experience of playing Rock Band for just 15 minutes with strangers increased empathy toward one another when they experienced pain from exposure to ice water, compared to the group who was playing the game alone. So Dance Central is the next game I want to talk about. And Dance Central franchise was my baby. It was my game that I'd always wanted to make, right? A dance party game with real choreography. We were so blessed to get access to the Kinect camera while it was still in development. And Dance Central actually became the killer app for the Kinect launch. And it was the first full body tracking dance game where you could learn dance routines designed by professional choreographers, and it kind of turned your living room into a dance party. So before Dance Central, dance games were mostly jumping on dance pads like Dance Dance Revolution. But with this new camera technology, our game software could detect your full body movement. And so we're finally able to make a game where we could detect real dance moves. You know, starting you off at doing a step touch and moving your hips from side to side, but eventually very complex moves from the hottest pop stars like Usher, for instance. So the game immersed you in a colorful environment with fun, expressive dance avatars, and you would mirror those dance moves in real time. I'll never forget the first time we debuted the game at the E3 game convention to thousands of predominantly male gamers who tended to fill the convention halls each year. And I was a little bit worried about how the game would initially be received in that environment, as we had made the game and designed the game for people who love to dance and willing non-dancers. But as usual, there were lots of big dudes who were kind of used to sitting on a couch playing Call of Duty, who were at the convention to check out all the new games. And I'll never forget, the brave souls who would come up onto the stage and their face, full of fear, their body very tense, and they'd come up and they would start playing the game, and I would see the fear melt away from their face and a smile emerge as they discovered that they could dance. And, I could almost feel that connection between the rhythm in their heart and the beat of the song. And it was so amazing to see them walk off the stage with this sort of newfound self-confidence and this surprise and this joy. We got a lot of stories from fans about the self-confidence that our silly dance game helped people to discover. So the next product I want to talk about is Muse. Muse is the first portable EEG brain sensing headband and meditation experience that helps people learn how to meditate with feedback on your brain. And so while you're meditating with Muse, your eyes are closed, your earphones are on, and the portable EEG device senses your brain waves and translates what's happening in your brain with a unique type of meditation feedback in the form of audio cues. It immerses you in a natural soundscape of nature, of weather, and that helps you focus your breath. Research has shown that meditation can reduce stress, anxiety, and even depression, and leads to an increase in self-awareness. So there's a research study recently from the Catholic University of the Sacred Heart in Milan that found that daily use of the Muse meditation experience over a 4-week period reduces stress and increases brain plasticity more than a group that was experiencing a relaxation exercise for the same period. All right, so let's dive into 5 practices that I have used over and over again in designing experiences. And we'll look at a bunch of these games as we go through them. So the first one is create a context that matters. So let me tell you a little story. When Harmonix set out to create a game that enabled the joy of making music for non-musicians, we started out creating this addictive rhythm action core mechanic on a PlayStation 2 controller, Sony PlayStation 2 controller, in a game called Frequency. And you were hitting the buttons in time with the music on this controller, and it took a little bit time to get it because the mapping on the controller did not actually directly map to what was on the screen. And so it took you a little bit of time, but eventually you got it. And once you got it, actually, like, it felt really good. So we brought people in to play test the game, but before we had them test the game, we had screenshots of the game, we had some marketing materials, we had the song list. And people didn't really want to play the game. They didn't really get this abstract environment. They weren't familiar with the songs. There wasn't really any desire when they saw what this game was. But then we had them play it. And took them a little while to get it, but they played the demo and they thought it was really fun. And they gave us really good feedback. So that translated into releasing a game that got critical reviews and almost no sales. It was a big failure. No one got it, no one bought it. Until we created and really discovered that people needed a context that they could understand and aspire to be, this addictive core mechanic didn't deliver on our success. And so we realized we had to wrap this core mechanic in a narrative that immersed the player in a world that he could understand, and we call that the Rockstar Sim. And it required hardware, plastic guitar that you could hold and play, Guitar Hero characters inside the video game, environments, rock clubs and arenas that you aspired to play in, and popular rock songs that you had only dreamed of ever being able to play. This took many years, failures, near misses. At least 3 prior games were released before Guitar Hero actually really found that magic in 2005. So I want to talk about Muse, because Muse is not a video game, but what's so interesting about Muse is that the team recognized the challenge in meditation. Meditation is an invisible activity. New meditators often don't know if they're doing it right. And the team developed this context that placed the person in a natural environment, immersing them in nature and the sounds of nature. And that enabled the feedback mechanic to really ground the player in a way that she could understand. All right, the next practice I want to talk about is developing layered interaction mechanics. So a compelling core mechanic is essential. It takes a lot of time to iterate on this experience, and the relationship between the user experience, all the human interactions, and the user interfaces, the way we communicate to the player, is so critical to reinforce each other to enable a transformative experience. So, for example, in Guitar Hero, the tight integration of the timing of the gems coming down on the track, coming toward you, the feedback animations playing just at the right time, the song playing, the audio feedback when the crowd screams, and the physical feeling of this guitar on your body, in your hands, the buttons on the frets, the strum switch, all of these things together deliver this fantasy that you are a guitar hero performing and enable this feeling of joy, the joy of making music. Then the next stage is layering on top of the core experience with additional interaction mechanics. And this is really important to keep people engaged in your product, to keep people engaged in the whole experience that you're delivering. So Rock Band was all about creating the feeling of being in a band. And so, first off, we had to make the individual instrument mechanics amazing. But then we had to develop collaborative mechanics, such as the overdrive mechanic. So if one of your bandmates was failing and doing really poorly, you could enact you could enact overdrive and save them. So you had to pay attention, right, to all of the different people that were in your band at the same time. The other really fun collaborative mechanic was called the Big Rock Endings. And so at the very end of the song, all of a sudden you had this opportunity for all of the players in the band to just go crazy. They're like button mashing their solos. But at the very, very end, there's one single note, and everybody together has to come together and hit that note at the same time. And when that happens, there is this like synchronous collective energy that comes together. There's a connection between all of the bandmates and this amazing celebration in your living room. Now, in Dance Central, actually in Dance Central 3, we created this extensive, wild and crazy story mode. And this was so that players would have to unlock parts of the story to get to more songs and to get to more routines. And what this did was it like deepened their immersion into being a part of this narrative, but it also leveraged their intrinsic motivation to dance, because this was connected to this external reward system that kept them more and more engaged to go deeper and deeper into the game. With experiences that feel really good, you know, players are motivated to explore more content or explore more experience in your product just because they want to feel that way again. All right, so the third practice is investing in feedback systems. Feedback is a powerful mechanism for learning. In the process of designing new experiences, often with new hardware and with new technologies, learning is a fundamental part of the immersive experience that you are creating for them. And because they need to understand, you know, what to do, how well they're doing, if they're doing it right, audio, visual, and tactile user interface elements are the tools you use to effectively communicate the user expectations as well as that feedback. So the first type of feedback I want to talk about is real-time feedback. And this is how we communicate to the player, you know, how am I doing? How am I doing? In Rock Band, you know, you're looking at these vertical tracks coming towards you. These shiny gems are placed in time on a moving track, and it helps you understand at what time, which note you should be hitting. And then it provides immediate feedback, both positive and negative, with animations and audio cues triggering in sync with your action. And this helps the player to understand his success and failure in real time. In Dance Central, flashcards move on the side of the screen. They scroll up, they've got the name of the move, and they've got an icon that indicates the type of movement. And this is helping you know what move to do when. And then below the character, you have these glowy circles and animations that come after every 4-count move that help you know whether you were doing poorly or you are flawless and perfect. Now, with Muse, with the Muse app, real-time audio feedback is the core to the genius of this meditation experience, because when you are gently focused on your breath, what you're hearing is, you know, peaceful weather sounds, you know, like maybe the lapping of water on the shore. But then when your mind wanders, the weather sounds pick up and the wind roars, and that's a cue. It's a trigger. It's a feedback trigger to help you notice that your mind has wandered and to return to your breath. The next feedback I want to talk about, I'm calling it post-level feedback. It's very common in games at the end of a level where you want to help the player understand how well they just did. You know, have they improved? What are their stats? And so in Rock Band, for example, here's the screen from the end of a song. You'll compare yourself potentially to the other bandmates. You might look and see what your score was and compare that to what you did earlier. And it could inspire you to play it again or to try something else. In Muse, a very similar type of feedback happens at the end of each session, where after you meditate, you get a view of your post-session data with a visualization of your brain activity in the form of a graph. And, you know, just as a meditation teacher might lead a student to reflect upon her experience, the graph gives you this contextual feedback where you can make that connection to the internal subjective experience that you just had. The third feedback mechanism is tracking one's play or practice over time. So, you know, with Rock Band, Dance Central, we were unlocking songs and routines over time. And you could play higher and higher levels of difficulty or more complex routines as you moved on, and you could track your scores and your stats along the way. But we would also often show you what was locked, sort of to motivate you to play more and unlock more and explore throughout the game itself. With Muse, the app documents a lot of different, you know, cumulative results over time. But, you know, one of them are weekly goals, for instance, where you have committed to so many minutes a week, and then you can track and see how well you're doing. These types of progression tracking can build motivational structures, and that can help people sustain a commitment to a practice and an engagement in your product. A particularly innovative approach to feedback systems is the one that Dr. Adam Ghazali is using to pioneer the use of video games as digital therapeutics. So it's a closed loop system. While the system records aspects of the player behavior, while real-time performance metrics are fed into the game engine. And then the game engine feeds back to the player an environment or adaptation of that gameplay that is scaled specifically to the person. And then this loop just continues, right, challenging the player. And then in addition, you know, these video games and experiences will provide rewards like a traditional video game does in the entertainment industry. And so, you know, this combination of delivering an enjoyable and engaging experience with a closed loop system designed with real-time personalization has really promise to deliver treatments for specific populations with deficits. The fourth practice that I want to share with you guys is nail the ease of use and delight on day one. So when designing a new experience, and especially with new hardware, the person's first-time user experience must be really easy, intuitive, delightful. As a designer, you need to ensure that they understand what to do, how to do it, that it will work, and be satisfying on their first time, you know, motivating them to experience your product again. So with all the products I've worked on, and I've worked on, this is something that you iterate on for a long time, and you keep testing to make sure that you get it right. The ultimate first day experience was created in in Guitar Hero, with Joan Jett's I Love Rock and Roll. So it was the first song that you were introduced to. And playing that song on easy, which most people started on the easy level, you immediately felt like a rock star. The selection of the song by the audio director was the perfect choice for a completely new experience that we were debuting, because the song has 3 simple power chords, perfectly thematic loops that are mapped directly onto the rhythm of the few notes that you're hitting. And so kids like immediately felt that connection, that they were playing along with the music, and their fantasy was immediately fulfilled. With Muse and with Dance Central, and actually many of our instrument games, there is a calibration step that was really important to get right on day one, because everybody's bodies are different. We all have unique bodies that need to be sunk up to the hardware to ensure that our experience will work. And so, and the thing that's so important is we want our player to get into the experience as soon as possible. And so it's really important to remove all of the barriers to any of this experience of getting the hardware to sync up. And so the best way to do that is to create a process, a calibration process, where you are providing clear instruction and giving feedback along the way, step by step. In Muse, you know, the person puts their headband on and calibrates to ensure that it fits right and the sensors are being read. And so the app does a really good job of leading the player through this very simple process with a very clear user interface design element that helps you understand that your brain is being read. And then we continue on with an initial meditation tutorial to help the players understand how to meditate with Muse. Iterating on like how effective your user interface communicates to your user is really important on your first day user experience. And I would not underestimate the time investment it takes and the high quality standard that you need to get right to make your first day completely seamless with new user. And you know, the main reason is that if you don't grab somebody on day one, you're gonna lose them, right, forever. So when we were making our dance and music games, we would spend a lot of time fine-tuning those first couple of levels because we wanted to make sure that they were really accessible and achievable to the newcomer. And you know, on day one, you want your player to believe, I can do this, and also that I feel good doing it. It's actually, I think, the highest value of how your product is discovered. And if the interactions and the activities are so easy to use and delightful, then, you know, even intrinsic motivation, because they just want to experience it again. All right, the fifth practice I want to talk about is user experience testing. Test, test, and test again. I highly encourage you to do this throughout your entire development process. Start very early and keep doing it throughout your entire development process. And I encourage you to bring a beginner's mind to this process and be really open to not knowing the answers that you're going to learn from your users. There are so many possibilities of what you will discover when you observe and listen to them. A humble designer who listens and observes is one who will serve most effectively. So over the years working in games, we always called it play testing. And nowadays, you know, it's usually called usability testing, but I don't like to lose sight of the word play. The play experience is full of this system, an entire system of the user's behaviors and interactions and their feelings and their perceptions. And these are things that you need to understand. What you want to understand is what experience is the person having and feeling and wanting, and how did the UI elements within your product help the person have the experience intended, or actually what barriers prevented them from doing so. So I encourage you to bring people in and watch them play, see how they use it, what they do, what they don't do they use it as intended, and then talk to them about the experience. And, you know, one piece that's really important is, you know, ask open-ended questions and don't lead the user to an anticipated answer of yours that you believe, because you're all serving them. You're not building products for yourself, and you're not building products for your team. I encourage you to listen and observe your users or your potential users, the people that you're creating the product for and who you're intending to sell it to. And the other thing is, don't forget the bias that we as creators bring into a room like this. If at all possible, I suggest that you bring people in to help you who are not as familiar with your product to do the user testing. Now, final note on testing your hardware. Make sure to test with a variety of people with different body sizes, different shapes, and especially in the early stages of R&D. You know, when really important decisions are being made on form factor, how many varieties you may intend to manufacture. These are really, really key to your business as you move forward, but it's also really, really important that your hardware works and fits with all kinds of people. As our field introduces new hardware and new technologies, we also need, as a community and as a company, you need to gain trust with your users. And testing is a great place to understand, where are they uncomfortable or unfamiliar or suspicious? And then testing is also a great place to discover what their desires are, you know, what their needs are, and whether this experience that you're building for them is meeting them where they are. So to recap, first, create a context that matters. So ground them in a world they understand. 2, develop layered interaction mechanics. Ensure the core experience feels really satisfying. 3, invest in feedback systems. Don't underestimate the necessity for effective communication through exceptional user interface design. 4, nail ease of use and delight on day one. So fine-tune your first-time user experience to be intuitive and accessible. 5, test, and test again. Be a humble designer, observe and listen to your users time and time again. So I think I'll end just with this belief. It is possible for this community to change the way people feel. The trans tech field wasn't a thing, back 5, 10, and 15 years ago when we were making these video games with the emerging technologies of that day. And there are a lot of people out there that may look at them and say, oh, those were just video games. But we enabled joy and connection and self-confidence in millions of people, and people who never considered themselves gamers. They played our games. Because we were dedicated to these practices that I shared with you guys today, these experiences we created were accessible, they were intuitive, they were really fun, and they tapped directly into a greater sense of well-being. So may that inspire all of you to make the next generation of amazing transformative experiences. Thank you guys so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Tracy. We're a little bit over 30 minutes, but your the presentation was so complete. I didn't want to interrupt you. So maybe Monza, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Tracy.
Hi.
Hello. Actually, I would like to know a little bit more about the develop layered interaction mechanics part, number 2.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anything specific?
No, I just feel like I didn't grip the concept as well as the other ones.
Yeah. So the concept of layering your mechanics, right? So often you want to have, say, like one very core experience, right? That's really feels really good. But that might not be enough to keep your player engaged or your person engaged. And so by layering more and more mechanics in your experience or in your app, right, you keep them engaged in your product over time as they experience more things. So, for example, in these video games, right, in Rock Band, playing the drums in and of itself is an amazing experience, right? You're playing, you're getting great scores, right? But if you actually are interacting with your bandmates and you use the collaborative mechanics, you have a greater experience or an additional experience. And then, for instance, say you have many modes of play or many different experiences, right? You might be in a situation where they're moving through the world tour. And so that's motivating for them to keep going. But now there's maybe a head-to-head battle. And so that's interesting for them to experience. And you can go deeper into that, into your product as a whole. That helpful?
Very helpful, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, cool. Maybe Suresh, I think your question is pretty general and maybe relevant to lots of people.
Okay. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Tracy, what goes into like creating a large and meaningful and purposeful shared narrative? And then how do you get people to believe in that narrative?
Say it again. Let me think about that. Yeah.
Okay. So what goes into creating a large and meaningful and purposeful like narrative? And then how do you get people to believe in that narrative?
It's an interesting question. I mean, there's probably lots of answers. I want to think a little bit about it in relationship to what we created. You know, I think when we go back to thinking about the band games that we made, that context, that context that we were creating at the time was to give you this fantasy, right? And so this big narrative that we designed around this had to support this feeling, right? And the feeling is really where that narrative came from, right? And I think part of the way I think about this, and I'm not sure that we thought about it then, you know, a lot of this is like, you know, I'm looking at history going, hey, we wanted to help people get that amazing feeling of playing in a rock band. So let's put this narrative and put you in it and make you feel that way. That's what we did. Now, the second part of your question was, how do you get people to believe? You know, I think when I think about how we did that, it was core. It was core to the experience, right? I mean, we put all of the elements. We put, you know, audio and visual and physical all together. We created a dynamic of collaborative interaction and competitive interaction. And all of those pieces actually supported, I would say, the greater that I was in a band. I mean, I'll give you a little example that may be useful here. You know, we were at Harmonix. In addition to making the game, one of the things we did, we asked everybody in the studio to be in a band together, a rock band. And that was part of the process of getting people together as a team, but it was also to be playing the game and getting feedback. But what happened was that the game, what the musicians and non-musicians that existed inside the studio began to play together. And I'm a non-musician, and I was playing with like these incredible musicians in the fake instrument band, right? I felt like I was in a band because of the relationship that I was having with these people, playing with them every week, but also because we were taking on personas in the game. We were making crazy names for our band. We were creating, you know, fun little activities that extended beyond playing. So I think it has a lot to do with helping people along the way really believe in the persona that you are helping them have in your experience. Is that helpful? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, I had muted.
It's a heavy one, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Andreas, you have a question about time to value. Can you ask that question?
Yeah, hi, Tracy. So yeah, it's kind of a metric we've started to pay attention to, this idea of time to value for the user, right? Like, where's that first aha moment where a user says, I'm really digging this, I really want to kind of engage more, like go longer and deeper in an experience? And how can we look at the data to try and shrink, you know, decrease that time to value so people get that aha moment sooner?
Yeah.
With the two examples that you shared, were you looking at similar kinds of metrics? Like, could you even see metrics, or were you able to kind of optimize the experience based on data?
We didn't. I mean, I'll be really honest. Like, back in the day, I was not a data person at all. And that being said, I would say we used tons of qualitative data. So we weren't looking at, you know, we weren't counting the numbers, let's put it that way. And we weren't looking at time. But we were very much looking at, you know, we understood that the first level, the absolutely first level that you played in a game had to make it, it had to give you that feeling. So, you know, it's different than in an app where you might have actually, you know, less time. You know, we knew we had, you know, a 3-minute song. We also knew that if you didn't have a good time that first, we might lose you. Especially we might lose you if you were a friend of the person and you didn't own the game, right?
So you were probably looking more at just, you were in person, really just seeing what people were doing and just seeing like their facial expressions, their body language, and that kind of stuff?
Oh, well, and how well they were doing and if they were struggling. Absolutely. So one of the things that we did at Harmonix is we created an in-house playtest team and system that I started actually back in Frequency. And so we brought people in constantly. And so we were and we would be able to compare from, one time we brought people into another, whether or not a complete newbie could succeed and have a good time, and this was something that was extensive. We were getting like all different types of people as well coming in and playing. And that was, I would say, the way in which we really fine-tuned the experience. But there's no question. And I mean, every single game we would try it out and it would be too hard. And, I literally would like walk around the studio going, no, this is too hard. This is too hard. This is too hard. And, how do we tweak the experience to feel like you're playing music or feel like you're dancing? But that was just about bringing a variety of people, all kinds of people into the studio and fine tuning it. Yeah.
Got it. That's helpful. Actually, maybe we can go by the most recent question that was asked by Tiffany specifically about Muse. I'll just ask it. Tiffany asked, how did you explore ways to gamify Muse to increase user interaction with the app?
Yeah, so I don't usually use the word gamify, but I know what you mean. I think that the way I think about increasing user interaction with the app is, how do we get people to sustain a meditation practice? Because transformation happens when you meditate over time consistently. And so what are the ways in which we can offer more content, trickle out some type of an unlock system, provide different types of visualization that's encouraging you, which we had many different types of engagement that we worked on in terms of, how we wanted to visualize different parts of your experience and what resonated with someone. But the content piece, I think, is really critical. And as you begin to release more and more content, people find either a teacher that they love, and that's the commitment that they continue to have, and then they notice the changes, and that's another piece to the puzzle of, discovering, using a little reminder, which actually the person sets themselves. I think that's one thing I would really say that's important, I think, in this field, especially when you are working with emotions that are more challenging for people to motivate them. And that is, insert some of their own input into the experience. So if I decide I'm going to commit to something, it's a lot different. If I decide when I want my reminder to come, when I see my reminder at 7 a.m., it's because I wanted it at 7 a.m. It's not because the system just threw something at me. And so I think being really sensitive to learn where the user is, like my whole meet them where they are, I think is really important. And then give them personal opportunities to put something into the app that actually encourages them.
Okay, awesome. I don't know if this is an easy question for you to answer. Rachel, why don't you ask your question? Rachel Rosenthal.
Hi. So I'm also a product owner and I do a lot of development. And the thing that's always hard is to know exactly what the initial development team should look like. And so taking a product like Muse, I was curious to know, what does the initial development team look like for it? And as the project owner, how you guide that creative development that's really starting from a seed, you know, and simultaneously develop business goals that people can really get behind and buy into. Because I always find that to be the most challenging balance.
Mm-hmm. Well, first off, I wasn't there when they started. So, I can't speak to that very, very early stage of R&D when there's only a handful of people. For them, you know, I came in when they started scaling. But, you know, that being said, I was there when we started to work on the Smith smart glasses, you know, simultaneously to be doing other things. And, you know, it really depends. I guess it's so specific, right, to the project that you're working on. I mean, certainly, you know, from the standpoint of what is the skill set, you know, do you decide that your product manager is also your UX lead? Or can you afford to have them be two different people? Because maybe their skill sets really are different and you're going to get a better product because of it. You know, what types of engineers do you need based on what is the infrastructure that you need to build and what is the code base of the interactions that you need to build? You know, do you need to have audio engineers or artists working with you, depending on what type of experience you are delivering? You know, I would say I never underestimate how important that user interface design is, because it's so much about how you communicate. But audio is also, like, do you have a writer that can speak in the right tone to speak to the right person? And that, like, is so often undervalued, right? But it's the thing in which how we're communicating to somebody, often with instructions on how to use your product for the first time. So what's that voice, and who's making those choices, right? You know, your engineering staff it really depends on what that product is. Are you making the hardware from scratch or not? Are you using hardware that already exists? You know, if you're building hardware from scratch, well then, you know, do you actually have a hardware team with all the expertise that you need? So it's a little bit hard to answer without really understanding what you're looking at. But I think in terms of, you know, where do you create priority, right? Initially, you need to prove out your core mechanic. Actually, before you build your first time user experience, you really need to prove that this experience that you're delivering is satisfying. And that's, I think, the first thing you build. And then when you get that thing that is like really, really good, now you have to figure out, how do you introduce this thing to a user and have that first experience that I spoke with the other gentleman about to be amazing? Because that, you don't start there. I mean, that tended to be the thing that I, you know, just hammer and hammer and hammer on the team forever. They'd been playing forever and they didn't think it was too easy, you know, and then I'd be like,
I have that same problem all the time.
all the time. So anyway, I mean, hopefully that helps. I feel like there's no cookie cutter for that, really.
Yeah, it's messy, but fun.
Yeah, but really fun.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe the last question that was asked, Mark.
Hey Tracy, this has been an incredible presentation. Thank you. I'm building a music practice app, and that is different from Guitar Hero because people are practicing, and it's kind of hard work, even though I try to make it as fun as possible.
Yeah.
My question is that for this practice, and a lot of us are working on different kinds of practice, how do you construct a narrative that connects the user's fantasy of who they will be with the actual practice of like being in the weeds and doing the work?
Did you say, how do you do that?
Yeah, like how do you construct that narrative about what they're doing in the app or in the experience?
So I'm not sure if I totally understand it, but I can riff, right? So, I mean, I think in some ways, actually, it is similar, okay, to what it is similar in some ways to what we did. Because if you think about it, people in our music games practiced, they did practice. I mean, their music sounded amazing. And maybe in your app, they don't sound amazing because they're really making music, which is hard and doesn't sound good always in the beginning. But the people who played our games practiced. And by practicing, you got better and better and better. And so you went from playing drums on beginner to playing drums on hard. And I only got to playing drums on hard because I practiced. But it was fun to practice because the music that was coming out of the speakers sounded really good. I think that is one huge piece. And then the other is we wrapped a narrative around it. So I felt kind of like a badass when I was drumming, right? And that is like kind of creating that made me more motivated to go in and try a new song. You know, the team would put a new song in. I'd go into my office. I was out of my mind because we were making like the hardest game we'd ever made. And then I just start drumming. Now, I was still practicing. I mean, you know, and so I guess, I mean, it'd be interesting to talk to you later, your practice experience, because maybe just a little lightweight narrative and maybe considering the way in which you have the audio coming back to the player might even help them. I would say it's the thing that really made the difference in the music games was the way in which the sound that you heard didn't sound awful. You know, when you're learning to play, it takes a long time before you sound good. And you don't have, you know, all the other instruments there sounding amazing. And I think that little thing that we put in there enabled people to practice when in fact they thought they were playing a music game.
So sneak it in. Thanks.
Sneak it in. Sneak it in.
Okay, we have time for one, maybe two questions. Maybe I can just have, okay, this is a very specific question about a specific product, but maybe Alan, you can ask your question, but make it maybe just more general.
Yes, hi, Tracy. Thank you for sharing with us your experience. I guess you answered most of the question before, but specific in the VR experience, we developed a therapy and the instructions come in a Google Cardboard. And so we were wondering, we want to remove the interface in a way. Do you have experience with projects or products that just remove the interface altogether in a way that the landscape kind of guides the user? Thank you.
So I would say in Dance Central, it absolutely. So, you know, with Dance Central, we were using the Kinect camera, which looks at your whole body. Right, and so you aren't touching anything. You know, the input is your movement in the air. There is no interface as far as your body is concerned. So what was important was to be able to help the player see themselves, because one of the things that was really challenging early on when we didn't have this little like silhouette in the corner was that they didn't know, it was hard for them to get the feedback, and they didn't know even if they were not in line with where they needed to be in the room. So like we figured out, oh, you know, that was a little grounding by just showing that little silhouette of them in there. And there was also some kind of connection, like, oh, there I am. Oh, it sees me, right? So that was really important. And then the other things were like, we created this whole user interface with your arm going up and down and right and left to move the menus. And we had to kind of teach you how to do that really quickly. And it, you know, it had to do with like really nice animations and a little bit of a, you know, of an example. But really there was no interface, and people learned how to dance that way. And they learned how to dance that way with getting feedback. I mean, you know, we had glowy red arms, you know, if you were doing it wrong, and we gave you, you know, feedback for each move if you were doing it right or wrong. So you got a lot of feedback along the way, even though you were like fully immersed in that world.
Thank you. We're out of time. So I just want to thank everyone for participating in this last session, and for Tracy for spending her Friday morning with us. Tracy, you're available on Slack maybe. I think there's like one or two other really specific questions Is it okay if people message you?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say to the community, you know, I love this community and I would love to connect with, you know, many of you. So feel free to reach out to me on Slack, and then we can connect further, or reach out to me on LinkedIn. I love diving deep into people's products and giving feedback. Being a mentor has been amazing for this program. And I don't know if in the chat, if we can, do we save the chat, Rue, or then I can know people that I might want to get in touch with?
Yeah. I can send you the chat. The chat is automatic.
Cool. I don't know about this technology. But
yeah.
Thank you guys so much. It's so fun to be able to share with you.
Thank you. Will you be at the conference as well?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
I'll be at the conference. I'd love to meet you. I love to hear about your products, love to check out your products and riff on that kind of stuff. I love experience. So yeah, good luck everybody. Make awesome things.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for this awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Tracy.
you, Tracy.
Thank you.